and found this transitional form.
In 1999, paleontologist Neil Shubin and his colleagues set out to find just such a creature.
What evolution enables us to do is to make specific predictions about what we should find in the fossil record. The prediction in this case is clear-cut. That is, if we go to rocks of the right age and the rocks of the right type, we should find transitions between two great forms of life, between fish and amphibian.
Armed with this prediction, Shubin and his colleagues organized an expedition to one of the most desolate places on Earth, the Canadian Arctic, about 500 miles from the North Pole, where rocks of just the right age are exposed.
Money was running out. This was it. We were told this was our last year up there. And then in 2004, in the third day of the season, a colleague of mine was removing rock and discovered a little snout sticking out the side of the cliff, just like, exactly like this. And he removed more rock, and more rock, and more rock, and it became clear this was a snout of a flat-headed animal. And that's when we knew, flat-headed animal at 375 million years old, this is going to be something interesting.
They called it Tiktaalik, which means large freshwater fish in the language of the local Inuit people. And it's one of the most vivid transitional fossils ever discovered, showing how land animals evolved from primitive fish.
Over here you have a fish of about 380 million years old. And what you see, just like any good fish, it has scales on its back and fins. You compare that to an amphibian, you find a creature that doesn't have scales, and it's modified the fins to become limbs, arms and legs. And the head's very different. It has a flat head with eyes on top and a neck. What we see when we look at the fossil record, at rocks of just the right age, is a creature like Tiktaalik. Just like a fish, it has scales on its back and fins. You can see the fin webbing here. Yeah, when you look at the head, you see something very different. You see a very amphibian-like thing with a flat head with eyes on top. It gets even better when we take the fin apart. When we look inside the fin, as in this cast here, what you'll see it as bones that compare to our shoulder, elbow, even parts of wrist, bone for bone. So you have a fish at just the right time in the history of life that has characteristics of amphibians and primitive fish.
So you can't get any better than that. You've got exactly the transitional features that you would expect at this particular point in time. Now, the interesting thing about this is that this was not the only discovery in this transition. In 2006, yet another intermediate form was found in the same evolutionary transition, a fish called Goganathus. It's more on the fish side, but look at the bones underlying one of its fins. It has a humerus, a radius, and an ulna, and the antecedents of phalanges. It was a fish with fingers. So what it amounts to is at the time of the Dover trial, we actually had a pretty good understanding of this transition. Then what happened in just a year since the trial is that Neil Shubin found Tiktaalik and the nature group found Goganathus. Now, one of my former students is this terrific guy named Colin Perrington who teaches at Swarthmore College, and Colin has a way with words. He should be writing advertising slogans. And he told me once, Ken, the next time you get involved in an argument with creationists or intelligent design people, don't show a lot of slides, don't use a lot of big words, don't go on and on, end it with one sentence. And this was the sentence that he suggested, which is, we have the fossils, we win. Now, as it turns out, this is a nice picture of Neil Shubin. Neil, like a lot of paleontologists, and this may surprise some of you, teaches at a medical school. And every now and then, when somebody goes on sabbatical, he gets pressed into teaching human anatomy. So after he had discovered Tiktaalik, somebody went on sabbatical, and last year, Neil had to teach human anatomy. And it struck him, he wrote, that the more he taught about human anatomy, the more he thought about the modifications of the vertebrate skeleton that we see in fish becoming amphibians. And he realized, in effect, that the human skeleton is actually, some people are worried about being descended from apes. He says, don't worry about that. You're actually descended from fish. And he wrote an extraordinary book. This is not a joke, though. This is a real book. He wrote an extraordinary book called Your Inner Fish. And this is, if you want to know why you hiccup, if you want to know where breasts come from, Neil has the answers. And the answers all have to do with your inner fish and the fact that the human body is in fact a modified fish skeleton. This is an extraordinary and entertaining book. Go out and buy it. I don't get a kickback from Neil, but you will absolutely love this book.